Coming up on Real News tonight, we know that he's a man surrounded by scandal, but what else should we know about Attorney General Eric Holder, Buck?
It's a man who's had a long history of some scandals, actually, Amy, and we know he's trying to negotiate right now to avoid contempt charges from Congress. But we're going to take a look at the career of Eric Holder and the many scandals that has been plagued in it, and we're going to see what this means for the future.
All right, scratching beneath the surface, that's up next on Real News from the Blaze in 60 minutes.
This is not going to be about politics. This is about principles. We're going to take it upon ourselves to be part of the solution.
We are going to restore history, restore our honor, restore his idea that character is what matters.
Let us not lose this battle because we sat down.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Good evening and welcome. It's me, Andrew Wilkow, filling in for Glenn again. Glenn is back tomorrow with an amazing show for Father's Day. Now, I know this is the time when you tune in to get away from the mainstream media babble fest. But tonight, we're going to do something a bit different. We're not going to cover the news and issues of the day per se. When I was here about a month ago to fill in, Glenn asked me, if you were going to die tomorrow, what would be the last show you would want to host? Is that a pretty good Glenn? Without much thought, I told him I would like to lock a bunch of people in a studio who represent the spectrum of the Republican Party, from the center to the right, and not let them out till we figure out what we all agree upon. So that's what we're going to do tonight, to a point. What unites us? Is it the reaction we all have to some politician who tells us that our sodas are too big, or we eat too much of this or that, or better still, we make too much money? We all seem to be sick of elites and their endless lectures on how we, the little people, are supposed to live. I don't know how, but they keep getting elected. Who elects them? Do they win with a mandate from the people, or the few who still show up? On the street, we all seem to be sick of big government. But big government keeps getting bigger. Rand Paul shocked many Ron Paul supporters by endorsing Mitt Romney. Listen to his explanation on my radio show yesterday. How do we now begin to primary out, move this party back to a Republican Party that the framers would be proud of? But it can't be done unless a Rand Paul or a Jim DeMint or a Mike Lee are there making the case, influencing elections, and finding candidates, inspiring candidates to run for those offices.
Well, the interesting thing about the people who wanted to publicize that I didn't care about my father because of the endorsement of Governor Romney, they don't quite understand anything about me. I have probably logged more hours and more miles and more time with my father, supporting my father for 38 years. In every venue, taking time off from college, medical school, traveling to and fro, Texas, New Hampshire, Iowa, around the country. And he has no more dogged supporter or enthusiastic supporter than me. But at the same time, I do acknowledge that I also am part of a Republican Party, and that we want to eventually beat the Democrats in the fall.
Beat the Democrats in the fall. Some supporters went as far as to call Senator Paul the spawn of Satan, when he's actually the spawn of Ron Paul. Now, Rand isn't turning his back on his father or the concept of limited government. Mitt Romney has the requisite delegates to take the Republican nomination, and Ron Paul doesn't. Mitt Romney is clearly the establishment choice, and Ron Paul was clearly the choice of libertarians. The establishment was hot off the McCain loss to Obama when the Tea Party sprung up as the grassroots voice for those dissatisfied with big government politicians, whether Democrat or Republican. The GOP elite resisted the Tea Party or tried to co-opt it, only to find many big government Republicans run out in primaries. Tea Partiers came in all stripes, from hardcore small government types to people who were just sick of high taxes. Even with the Paul Romney endorsement, it still does not feel like conservatives are united. Honestly, no one really seemed that excited about Mitt Romney. But now he's the other guy in the general election taking on President Obama. Now, Obama hasn't delivered all the things to everyone he promised. Democrats lost the House. What's left of the Constitution is kind of in his way, and he can't just issue executive orders. For that, you've got this progressive coalition saying he has not gone far enough away from the Constitution. We have seen political opponents coalesce around issues in history. In 1899, anti-imperialist leagues sprang up all over the country as a response to a federal government seeking to expand its power. The gatherings were called Liberty Meetings. In October of that year, 10,000 delegates from all over the U.S. met in Chicago to create the National Anti-Imperialist League. The league's platform argued a self-governing state cannot accept sovereignty over an unwilling people. The United States cannot act upon the ancient heresy that might makes right. All this over the proposed annexing of the Philippines after the Treaty of Paris. Now, Samuel Gompers, the first president of the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, before it was the AFL-CIO, joined in with industrialist Andrew Carnegie. Industry and labor on the same side. It happened. You want to know why? Carnegie knew that war would interrupt trade and profit. Gompers knew that workers would fight a war. So both had a mutual interest in preventing the federal government from annexing the Philippines, knowing full well they would end up in war and having to defend the Philippines. Now, we've been living with a progressive coalition bent on making the government bigger and more oppressive under the guise of the common good. Now the AFL-CIO works with groups like Earth Justice and Friends of the Earth to be the point people for the EPA to shut down projects like the Keystone XL pipeline, which cost thousands of blue-collar jobs, the kind of jobs that union members do. So now labor is fighting industry, the very industry where their members would work. Feminists that look at traditional gender roles with disgust, that sue businesses because some guy told a joke, that think sexual harassment is some guy looking at them, are on the same side as the Islamists that stone women in the public square for being accused of adultery. If you ask a feminist why they support these Islamists, they'll respond with some blather about culture. Planned Parenthood, the poster people of the abortion industry, are working with liberal Catholics and other religious social justice activists. The Occupy movement is being funded by very wealthy liberals. They're giving resources to those that want to eat the rich. In Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky has a whole chapter dedicated to the tactics of organizing. You find people with common interests, stay within their experiences, and put them together to create a coalition of vast power. So there it is. They all agree on big government. Now, what do we agree upon? I've put a couple amendments to the United States Constitution, which I have in my back pocket here. The 18th Amendment and the 21st Amendment. Now, when I go to the panel, we're going to go over the processes of the Constitution, our personal feelings, and where we stand. The 18th, I don't agree with this. The 18th Amendment bans the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the United States and also bans the export. I don't agree with this. But the Constitution was amended by the constitutional process. Now, if we want to get rid of this, do we expect an executive order? Do we want Congress to overstep its bounds? Do we? No. The 21st Amendment repealed the 18th. The process was upheld. Now, remember when I said I wanted to lock a group of conservatives in a room and let them sort out the issues? For the next hour, that's what we're going to do. Joining me, Catherine Mangu-Ward, managing editor of Reason Magazine, Edge Hutchins from the Atlas Society, Andrew Klavan, author of Crazy Dangerous, Matt Raymond, Log Cabin Republican board member, George Jarkissi, member of the Republican National Committee Finance Committee. So, just talked about the process. We're all people. We all have personal opinions. How often do you find yourself feeling one way about an issue, but saying, you know, I don't see where the federal government should be doing that or even the state government from doing that?
You know, I think that's one way of saying that's what it means to be a libertarian. It's looking at stuff that people choose to do and saying, that's insane, that's ridiculous, go for it. When I say people, I mean individuals. Now, when we talk about governments, I think we've got a whole different thing going on. When we say, okay, now the federal government has done something, Barack Obama has done something, that's insane, then we don't have to say go for it. Then we turn to, as you've referenced, the process. And there are ways to decide who gets to do what when. I think we should maximize the opportunities for individuals to do stupid things all by themselves.
Now, Andrew, I don't mean to put you on the spot here. You and I talked about your transformation. Were you once on the side that if it felt good and it made sense, hey, why not have government do it?
Yes, in fact, part of what converted me from liberal to conservative was my deep belief in the American system and the fact that the left kept corrupting it. It's very easy to see. I believe in the system and the process so much, but it's easy to see that the system, the process can be corrupted. I mean, I think Roe v. Wade, whether you agree with abortion or not, is a corruption of the system. There is no right to abortion in the Constitution, and to find it there corrupts that process. So that's why people like me get very upset, because the people are arguing back and forth about abortion. That's not the argument to me. The argument is who gets to decide. It's always who gets to decide, and clearly the state should decide.
That's the funny thing, because you find yourself in arguments with people that can't separate that. If you say, well, I think Roe v. Wade was poorly decided, oh, you hate women.
Exactly.
It's a war on women. Now, Ayn Rand, where do you think she would have? Where do you think she would have stood on a lot of this stuff?
Well, I think what Rand would have said, and I would, as an objectivist, I don't want to just limit to her opinion, is you have to put our government and our Constitution in context, specifically in the context of the Declaration of Independence and the understanding of America's founders of the Lockean Enlightenment worldview of individualism. That each of us as individuals have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that the purpose of government is to protect those rights. And we came up with a Constitution, a brilliant document from James Madison and the founders, to have checks and balances to make sure that the government can only do what there's a consensus to do. And remember, the Constitution is a document of limited and enumerated powers. And you are quite correct to mention, for example, the 10th Amendment, which says those powers not explicitly given to the federal government are reserved for the states. I would add the 9th Amendment, which essentially says that the enumeration in this document, in this Constitution, of certain rights should not be construed to disparage or deny others retained by the people, meaning I have a right to do as I please unless there's a darn good reason enumerated somewhere for the government to stop me. And the conflict that you highlight that we have today is because that process, that constitutional process, was formulated with the understanding that there's a consensus that individuals should generally be allowed to run their own lives and the government should be limited to protecting it. And that's what has disappeared, is that moral consensus on the individual.
Well, you know what's amazing, and the truth is, when we look at local power, state power, federal power, county power, the closer you live to other people, the more likely people are going to have opinions about the behaviors of one another. Now, George, you're on the finance committee. I mean, some of the people we were talking about, or I was talking about in the monologue, are the people that frustrate conservatives. They're Republicans, but in a lot of cases, and this is not an indictment on you. You and I have talked before about your personal feelings, that we sometimes find ourselves frustrated by the Republican Party, which is supposed to be the party of more liberty, not less.
Well, we've seen over a period of time where maybe 30, 40 years ago, if the center was between the parties, you've seen the entire Republican Party, in my opinion, move left. Now, what I think is interesting about this group and locking this group here in this room together is the fact that even though there are different opinions, with the economic problems that we're having in our country and the disgust at where we are as a world power in deficits and everything else, that economics is affecting everybody. It's affecting, and with that, it's uniting a lot of these parties. So it's really interesting to see all the different point of views being pulled together here. And in my opinion, mostly over the most important thing, that people aren't working, people are feeling it at home, maybe their lives are not as comfortable as they were, maybe they're not traveling as much as they were, their kids are affected, etc. And that really caused people to action. You saw that action in a thing. I think the SOPA issue was a big issue, because you saw the American people rise up in the matter of a very short period of time with a large voice and you sent everybody in Congress. I mean, Washington was heading for a cover. I mean, you couldn't find anybody talk SOPA the next day.
They run away a lot.
I mean, they just disappeared. I know SOPA. I've never heard of SOPA. You know, it was just over. And so my point is with blogs and Twitter and everything, the American people found a new voice, and they are frustrated with their economic well-being, and that's the quickest way to rile up a person who usually is kind of quiet and you will hold back and will give the benefit of the doubt and let those loud people talk about it. I'm quiet, I'm in my life, I'm going to worry. But now you've riled them up, and a lot of those people are conservative, and they may have various points of view, but they can agree on the fact that they don't want big government, they don't want overspending, they don't want to be overtaxed, and they want a good life for their family, and they want better for their kids than they've had.
Now, 50 years ago, do you think there'd be such a thing as the log cabin Republicans? I mean, Goldwater did once say, you don't have to be straight to shoot straight, but 50 years ago, there probably wouldn't have been an organization like the log cabin Republicans, but it seems as time goes on, people are finding less to complain about with the social issues and say, you know, there's got to be people out there that maybe I disagree on this, that, or the other thing, but in the end, they believe in free markets, they believe in capitalism, they just want low taxes, the right to run their businesses and lead their own lives. But what's funny is, I mean, if there's anybody who's an enemy to the progressive movement, it's got to be you.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to your producer the other day, and one of the reasons they wanted me on the show was that I was a voice of the establishment, and in a way, I was greatly complimented by that, because I think that would strike many people very strange. You know, I've found that being a gay Republican, that you're much more welcome within the party than you are to a gay leftist, for instance. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. But log cabin Republicans are about inclusion, and that's all we're trying to do. In fact, you know, you said there wouldn't have been this organization 50 years ago. That's correct. And I think part of our, not necessarily our mission statement, but certainly our mission, is that we want to get to a point in society where we'll go out of business. And frankly, I think we will at some point, because you look at the trends, these issues are really becoming less and less of an issue. Even though they're being debated now, I think we're going to get to a point very quickly where we're going to move past this, and thank goodness we can focus on issues that are important for every single person in this country, regardless of sexuality, race, color, creed, and so forth.
Well, that's why I put this panel together, and you having a personal opinion on other people's lifestyles or things that they do, if you're not trying to infringe on them, if you find that the argument of trying to, I don't know, make somebody else be something they're not, when you run out of that, you say, okay, well, there's no reason in arguing with this person. They're going to be who they are. I'm going to be who I am. The end is, am I going to lay awake worrying about these things, or am I going to try to find as many people on the most important things that agree with me? So when we talk taxes, it fascinates me. We're going to get to gun control a little bit later, that I've always said in my radio program, gay people should exercise their right to keep and bear arms. Absolutely. Because of gay bashing. Absolutely. But yet progressives, I mean, it amazes me that the gay rights community seems to be the first one all in for big government, but at the same time wants the government out of their lives and can't see the arguments that we're going to make tonight about, look, you can have personal opinions, you could disagree, you could not like something, but the more you invite government in, the more government you're going to get. So that's going to be one of the big things that we do here tonight, is hash those things out. And again, I want personal feelings. I mean, if you say, I don't like this, or I'd prefer to ban that, or I don't like gambling, but hey, it's profitable for Las Vegas. That's what they do out there. I can't find anything in the Constitution, because rarely do we see debates and panels and political discussions where you separate your personal feelings from the process. I mean, how many times have you seen someone get verbally assaulted because they aired a personal feeling that didn't translate to governance? It feels like progressives, whatever their personal feelings are, translates to governance.
Yeah, by the way, this is interesting, because I know you're going to get into this later, but I argue that the kind of people who are often attracted to government are those, for example, like Mayor Bloomberg, who, well, he thinks we should all be healthy. Well, that's fine. I think I should be healthy, and I live a healthy life and so forth. But I was the mayor of my town essentially for a number of years, so I've dealt with government right at the local level and kind of on up to working for the Joint Economic Committee of Congress. And while they're great people like my former boss, Dick Armey, you find a lot of the politicians, they're busybodies. You know, I don't like your tie, and you know, you really shouldn't be drinking this and eating this, and and normally we can take or leave their opinion, but to them it's a crusade.
They're the government.
They are the government. They are the Michael Bloombergs. They are these people who tend to be on the left, but you do have them on the right. You have the Rick Santorum mindset on the Republican side. I don't care what Santorum's personal view on birth control is, okay? I have my view, he has his view, that's fine. But the fact that he was talking about and making a big deal out of it, pornography, the same sort of thing. He has his view. I probably agree with him on, you know, whether you should be spending all your time looking at porn, okay? But the point is, you have politicians who want to get in there and say, I'm going to go out and crusade and make sure that nobody drinks a big Slurpee or whatever it is, and that's part of the mindset of the politician today, which is why you have this problem. We've gotten away from this notion of individualism, which is where, you know, you do your thing, and as long as you're not initiating use of force against me, then that's cool. And that moral foundation of tolerance is what has decayed, and it's most notable in our politicians who are paternalist and who want to micromanage us and who are truly dangerous and un-Americans.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's been a tough week for Eric Holder. The latest on Fast and Furious and how it serves as an example on how not to solve our country's problems when we come back.
In 2000, the U.S. national debt was $5.6 trillion, and gold was $272 an ounce. By 2010, the U.S. debt was $13.5 trillion. Gold had risen to $1,421. Today, our government is projecting over $20 trillion of debt in the year 2016. Isn't it time you own gold? You can't control federal spending, but you can control where you put your investment dollars. Goldline has safely delivered billions of dollars in gold to its clients for over 50 years. Diversifying with gold is a smart strategy, and it's easy to get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience, and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy gold with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
Attention those on Medicare with diabetes. You may be eligible for an upgraded meter.
If you're tired of stabbing your fingertips to test your blood glucose, we have news that could change your life. If you're on Medicare with diabetes, then you need to know there's an alternative method for checking your blood glucose every day. You don't need to stab your fingertips anymore. The Embrace meter from Diabetes Care Club is easier to use and nearly painless. And the best news is that Diabetes Care Club would love to send you one of these meters. This method hurts less, and because you can see and hear your results, it may be easier to understand.
Your blood glucose reading is 89.
Call now to find out why. Nearly 250,000 patients have joined Diabetes Care Club. Membership is free, so is the call.
Call 1-800-213-7027.
Talk to Diabetes Care Club. You'll be glad you did.
Are you a homeowner 62 or older? Are you looking to access cash from your home or eliminate your monthly mortgage payment? How about both? Then call the number on your screen. With a reverse mortgage, there are no monthly mortgage payments. You will still own your home, and you will have many options on how to receive your cash. Call now. It's time to get all the facts, and Reverse Mortgage Solutions is here to help.
Call 855-200-1039. That's 855-200-1039.
Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, a coup in Egypt. Will, what's happening?
Yeah, the only democratic institution in Egypt was dissolved today. So where we go from here, that's what we're going to discuss tonight.
All right, all that and much more on Real News from the Blaze coming up at the top of the hour.
Well, this week, was a bad week, let's be honest, for Attorney General Eric Holder. He testified yet again to Congress specifically about the controversial Fast and Furious program, the program that sent weapons into Mexico and is now believed to be connected to crime. Over the past year, Eric Holder's appeared in both Congress and the House Judiciary Committee. And although it's been a full year, the answers are still unclear, and it still remains uncertain the logistics of the program he is credited for overseeing. Let's take a look at Eric Holder back in November in his initial congressional hearing.
Can you name me one person who's been held accountable for this Fast and Furious operation? Just one in the Department of Justice.
Well, we have made a number of changes with regard to personnel, both in the Phoenix U.S. Attorney's Office, also at the ATF headquarters here, and I will certainly await the report that comes out of the Inspector General, and I will assure you and the American people that people will be held accountable for any mistakes that were made in connection with Fast and Furious.
Non-answers like that are a talent. Now here he is 7 months later in front of the Judiciary Committee.
When you've been here before and we've talked about Fast and Furious and you were asked who actually authorized Fast and Furious, you had said we may not ever know who authorized Fast and Furious. Are you any closer right now as you sit here to knowing who authorized Fast and Furious?
I suspect that we are closer, given the fact that the Inspector General that is charged with the responsibility of investigating this matter at my request has been in the field and been interviewing people, and my guess would be that we are closer to that. I would expect that report will be out relatively soon.
See any similarities? This is how the federal government uses power to solve guns being smuggled across the border. The federal government can't get its own house in order. So should it be responsible for solving our social issues or any issues for that matter? Now I'm going to go back to the panel. Behind me are some social issues on the board. We're talking off the air. I'm going to start with the most ridiculous one, which is the soda ban. Now, we could look at this and say, this is absolutely ridiculous, but Matt, on a local level, nothing in the Constitution really says anything about soda or drink size. I don't know what the state of New York Constitution would reference, but I'm assuming that pretty much at the local level, the mayor can do it, and you can either vote him out or get out of New York.
People can decide whether they want to abide by that or not. I mean, speed limit is a good example where people don't necessarily abide by the letter of the law. What I don't understand, frankly, is just the rationale. I mean, you ban soda, but for instance, something like a McDonald's shake or a Jamba Juice, ounce for ounce, has about 2 to 3 times the calories in it. So, he's basically telling us how to eat. Is he going to begin telling us, how to exercise, perhaps an Obamacare-like mandate for gym memberships? I mean, where does it stop? And just from a practical standpoint, how is this solving any problem? I don't see that.
But on a constitutional level,
traditionally, municipalities have very wide-ranging powers in dealing with public health issues. But you have to distinguish between recommending that a law be changed or a guy's power be taken away and the power of ridicule and shame, which is what we should be exercising on Mayor Bloomberg.
And we are. I think everybody is.
And in fact, the relevant constitutional issue here for us is the First Amendment, right? I mean, this is, at this point where we turn is speech. We can say as many times as we like in as many venues as we like, Mayor Bloomberg is an idiot. Because Mayor Bloomberg is an idiot. This soda ban doesn't make any sense. You're talking about, though, separating personal view from, sort of sticking by the process. I think you actually might be overstating the kind of like it and lump it case here. We can say Bloomberg has done this. We have to wait till the next election to vote him out. True, but in the meantime, we can also scream bloody murder, stock illicit soda cups in our stores and see what happens. There's a huge slate of ways to engage in the process other than just wait till the jerk can be voted out.
One point, though, you could put as much alcohol as you want in a glass in New York and nobody's going to say anything.
Yeah, though I would add this, that you're right, that localities usually have a great deal of discretion under our system. Certainly this isn't a federal issue. But I would argue also that local governments can't be dictators either. In other words, there should be and are limits to local government power. The local government, I used to be on my local government.
Let me jump in. Where's your right?
Wait a minute.
Where's your right?
This is the mistake that a lot of people make.
Here we go. Here comes the debate coming. I like this. This is good.
Okay. I don't have to find a right in the U.S. Constitution, or for that matter, in my state constitution or anywhere else. The assumption is that I have a right to run my life as I see fit, as long as I don't initiate the use of force against others, and that we do deal with each other based on mutual consent. The government has to find a damn good reason, consistent with its power to protect me, to stop me from doing something.
That's where we say you can vote with your feet.
And that's one of the importance of having a federal system. I agree with that. That if you really don't like it, and that's what's happening. I just did a piece, updating a piece, issue of Regulation magazine that I edited for Cato 15 years ago, California Autopsy on a Regulatory Suicide. I just updated it looking at all the jobs and businesses and so forth that have left California because of the idiotic regulations there. Most of these are business and economic regulations, but the point is local governments don't have the right to be dictators either. They have a lot more discretion traditionally under our system, but I don't concede that that the local government even has the right to tell me to do certain things.
Here's the thing.
Let me bring George in this one, because you're with the RNC Finance Committee. I mean, is this where we even find that some of the people we might consider moderates or even rhinos, I mean, even they're not on board with this?
Yeah, they're not on board with it. I'm going to tell you why. I mean, at this time, the Republican Party needs to focus on the one thing that's ailing us, and I hate to continue to go back to it, but it's the economy that's got everybody up in arms. It's the people that don't have jobs. It's the huge amount of people that are unemployed. For what ivory tower is New York living in that they have the time to waste on what kind of soda pop you drink? I mean,
they're forcing you to understand.
And furthermore, how the mindset of a government official to want to push down a soda pop on you tells you that the people that push that through aren't thinking clearly. They're not thinking on a constitutional basis. They're not thinking about freedoms and the rights of Americans. It's a big government mindset, and we have
on the local
to
level,
reset it.
though.
On the local level.
On the local level.
Still, they want to enforce big government on you.
All right, so sort of we got almost consensus that on the local level, as ridiculous as some of these things are, that's the local level. All right, now let's look at gay marriage real quick here. State, federal, local. Now, there are some conservatives that want to ban gay marriage at the federal level. It's not in the Constitution. There are some gay progressives that want it ushered in at the federal level. Not in the Constitution. There are some that would say get the government out of the marriage business altogether. And then the question comes about the tax code. Now, are we looking at this and saying the state should do this? Are we saying that it's unfair if the state does this because some states won't allow gay marriage? Is it a referendum issue? Layer of government.
Well, you know, actually, you mentioned the Constitution, and Log Cabin, and I think proponents would argue that it is constitutional. If you read the ruling of Judge Von Walker in California, which struck down Proposition 8 out there, he makes a very compelling constitutional argument, primarily in the 14th Amendment with due process and equal protection clauses in there.
Under the constitutional law?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
And the 10th Amendment still sets
However, the 14th Amendment also says no state. It's not just the federal government. It says no state shall infringe on any of these rights, immunities, or privileges as well. So that's the constitutional basis for that.
But marriage is not...
Where do you get a right to be married, though? I mean, listen, this has nothing to do... This has nothing to do...
The court has said that marriage is a fundamental right. I do not remember the case, but that was cited.
I don't know where they would get the power to make that.
Yes, I don't think
cited in Judge Walker's...
I don't... Here's an instance where I don't disagree with you necessarily on the issue, but I do disagree with you very strongly on the process. Californians who voted that amendment to their constitution in, I think, were well within their rights to ban gay marriage. You don't like it, I don't like it, but that's not the point. They definitely had the right, and I think the federal court was stepping way out of line in knocking down that completely legitimate law that they passed. This is the thing. Some things you have to convince your neighbor to do. I mean, that's the whole point of our process, is you have got to go out there and convince the people. So far, in liberal states, in religious states, in non-religious states, this issue has died the death. You haven't done your job.
Do you believe that marriage is a right?
No. I do not believe that marriage is a right. Marriage is something that the state
Not on the constitutional level. There's no mention of marriage in the Constitution.
Personally, I would like to see marriage be a contract.
Right. The 10th Amendment, you get a state marriage license, you get a municipal marriage license if you're in a city like New York. So essentially, if it's not mentioned in the Constitution, and you get a state marriage license, a state is then given the power to design marriage.
Well, except, I mean, there was a stunning moment earlier, which I'm afraid we missed, where Ed actually understated his case, which never happens, as you know, Ed.
Stop that.
And that's, you know,
that's why we have the Atlas Society and Reason Magazine. You know.
So, you know, he makes this incredibly important point, which I think you're glossing over a little bit here in this argument about the importance of process, which is, if it's not in the Constitution, it's not then, okay, you know, states or municipalities, go to town, you can do whatever you want. He said there has to be a darn good reason for them to do it. Not just a darn good reason, there has to be a constitutional authorization for them to do it in their own constitutions, in their own.
Well, that's designing by the states. If the people of California vote something in, or the state of Vermont votes something in, all powers not delegated become state powers.
But the fact that the word marriage isn't in the U.S. Constitution actually has nothing to do with this question of whether or not it should be a constitutional issue. Right?
Now, is it the tax thing, or is it the piece of paper?
No. Well, there's a host of rights, first of all, and responsibilities that come with marriage. Some people say there's about 1,100 different ones. Things as simple as hospital visitation. Adoption is something that's been a debate as well. So, you know, it's fascinating to me that you have a group of people that are clamoring for membership, essentially, in this positive institution, an institution that's good for society, and yet there are those who are trying to keep them out.
Okay, so I guess we don't always agree on the process. Again, I don't find marriage or relationships in the Constitution.
But you don't have to find it in the Constitution because of the 9th Amendment.
But it goes back to the 10th Amendment. And again, the tax issue, and I got to wrap this segment up. We have more of this when we come back. Egypt could be on the verge of civil war. A full-scale coup is underway. Find out how the once celebrated Arab Spring plays out among Democrats here at home when we come back.
Do you want to change America? Activate.
We are in the fight of our lives. We are witnessing firsthand the fundamental transformation of America.
33 million Americans think they're registered to vote, but they're not. Go to glennbeck.com today to register yourself and your friends to vote. Elections have been won and lost by one vote. Don't become a statistic this fall. Make your voice heard.
Like you, I would do anything to protect my family. That's why I have food insurance, the emergency food supply that guarantees my family's most basic needs, safe and nutritious food. These high-quality freeze-dried meals last up to 25 years and are compact, affordable, and delicious. Start with a 2-week supply or plan for several months, whatever's right for you. Provide security for your family. Order food insurance today.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hello, I'm Gary, and I'm not a paid actor. I went from owing $43,000 to the Internal Revenue Service to paying them $1,000.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack of all trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
Tired of twisting and turning that stubborn old garden hose onto a spigot? Sick of getting soaked when it won't fit right? Now just snap on and off with Snap 2.0. It lets you snap all your hose supplies in 1 second flat. Just attach the connectors to any fixture, then snap off a sprinkler and snap on a garden feeder. Fast and easy. Snap 2.0's universal connector fits thousands of different watering fixtures, and its interlocking technology clamps both sides together to create a watertight seal. Even over this expensive computer, not a single drop. When you order, we'll send you not 1 but 2 sets for just $10. Plus this adjustable pressure nozzle to power blast grime, free. But call now and we'll double the entire offer free. Just pay separate processing and handling. That's 4 Snap 2.0 sets and 2 pressure nozzles, all for just $10.
To order Snap 2.0 for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-875-3128 or order online at snap20.com.
Complicate Lincoln's reputation as an angel. How about that?
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm Andrew Wilkow filling in for Glenn, and we were just talking with the panel off the air. Tonight, chaos in Cairo. Again, the Egyptian military claims control of the city. Egypt's highest court ruled the Islamist-led parliament be broken up immediately. Now a former member of the Mubarak regime has been given a green light to be a valid candidate in this weekend's presidential election. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood calling the court's decision a full-scale coup, and people protesting in the streets. So to chant the way they do at Occupy, is this what democracy looks like? Remember, it was our own White House that celebrated the Arab Spring and the people of Egypt last year, and it's this administration that's causing a divide within the Democratic Party. Here at home on everything, from the President Obama's attacks on Mitt Romney to the Wisconsin recall election, the Keystone Pipeline to tax policy. Instead of echoing the president's idea to raise taxes on people making $250,000 a year, congressional members are singing a very different tune. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer want to punish the so-called wealthy by imposing higher tax rates on people earning more than $1 million. Then you've got some senators like Claire McCaskill, Mrs. Private Jet, and Ben Nelson who just can't make up their minds on extending the Bush tax cuts. The latest turmoil comes just months after the left accused the right of discontent within the party. Here's an idea. Instead of Washington deciding how much we should pay in taxes, why don't we tell governors that that's their job? If we could lower the federal tax rates just a bit, the local counties could pick it up. So what can conservatives agree on when it comes to taxes? Let's ask our panel. Now, we were talking off the air about the last segment. We got into the process of social issues, gay marriage, guns, so forth and so forth. But I think this is something we're going to agree upon more, that under the guise of taxes and government regulation, there's a whole bunch of things the federal government, honest to God, has no business being involved in. George, like housing. Where's the federal mandate for HUD, Fannie, Freddie, the FHA? Where do you see that anywhere in the United States Constitution?
Yeah, with Hoffa, it doesn't exist, right? I mean, it's not there. You can't find it. And, and yet you see the government's power and influence continuing to grow year after year. And what they forget, and what so many Americans forget, is the unintended consequences that come from every decision. There's just a ripple effect of consequences that do affect you at the community level, which is why these decisions made closer to where they're at the community or state level, tend to do much better when it comes to things like housing or education.
Because you find, in some states, like New Jersey, they have the Coalition of Affordable Housing. The state comes into a community and says, guess what? We've decided this is where a low-income housing project is going to go, and we don't care if you like it or not. Again, I don't see any power of the federal government. I'm a big 10th Amendment guy. Do you see a power of the federal government in housing?
Well, one thing that you can see for sure is just how incredibly awful the federal government is at anything that has to do with housing.
They're not good at writing mortgages?
Constitutional issues aside, although I think they're incredibly important, that list is a list of things that the federal government is
the worst
terrible at. Just really terrible. I mean, we've doubled the amount that we've spent on education in the last 30 years on the federal level and on the local level, for that matter. Test scores are flat. We've got nothing for that money. Housing, we've poured billions, literally billions, hundreds of billions into affordable housing, subsidizing, mortgages for low-income people. Greatest housing collapse in recent memory, right? Education, I've mentioned cops, teachers, firefighters. Increasingly, that's being funded by the federal government. $100 billion of stimulus money went to fund the salaries of already existing public school teachers. The states are out of money. So out of money. Because
the taxpayers are paying such an enormous federal tax rate to have their money leave their town, leave their county, leave their state, go to the federal government, have somebody beg to bring it back to do what could have been done if it just never left in the first place.
And the butt end of that cycle is that the states and the local governments wind up going begging to the feds you know, on an
Clients.
increasingly regular basis, please, we're a little short this month. If you could just cover it for us, that would be great.
Call it a Department of Homeland Security grant.
It's a Department of Homeland Security grant so that you can buy your, you know, body armor for your SWAT team. I mean, it's the whole system has gone completely dysfunctional, so that even things that are theoretically, technically still the business of the state are being funded by the feds.
Now, before I get bring it up to this side, as a former liberal, literary circles, this is the stuff that people in places like New York City can't get enough of. They think the federal government should be doing all of this stuff.
Yeah, well, you can always drag out the cops, teachers, and firemen to break a mother's heart. You know, I mean, those are the things. Those are the first government workers that they mentioned. They never mentioned.
Yeah,
the
Mitt Romney's going to lay off cops, teachers, and firefighters.
Well, they never mentioned the 500 bureaucrats who've been sitting around for 30 years playing with a pencil and now collecting a pension. I mean, before you ever have to fire a cop, you have to fire, you know, at least 20 of these pencil pushers who are doing nothing. But almost everything you've got up there, with the exception of cops, I can't see any role for the federal government. I mean, I suppose there are federal laws, so there has to be federal law enforcement. But aside from that, I can't see why.
Yeah, but that's the FBI and the U.S. Marshals. That's federal law. We're talking about police officers. When you call 911, the FBI doesn't show up.
I don't see why the federal government should have anything to say about any of this.
Well, I was going to say that I think it's unfair that states that have been fiscally responsible, say, you know, Wisconsin,
that's a good one. That's a good one.
Are bearing the brunt of the irresponsibility of other states that have these untenable pension plans and the sops to the union. So that, you know, the first stimulus was supposed to, you know, pay for these people, and now they're asking for a second
8% unemployment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, are we trying to save the jobs that were supposed to have been saved the first time? I mean, I don't understand. Now, it was, I think, a rhetorical slip on Romney's part when, you know, when he used the words cops, teachers, and firefighters instead of focusing on the fact that this is bureaucracy, the you know, pension plans and unions run amok.
Wouldn't you love to hear someone like Mitt Romney say, you know, you can look, I love cops, teachers, and firefighters, but you got a mayor for that. This has nothing to do with me. I'm running for president.
Yeah. By the way, I was the police commissioner in my small town for a little while.
Well, you were everything. You were mayor, Contract for America.
It's it's about 1,200 people. You know, it's a very small town. You know, so it was only a few. You know, but you know, so I mean, this was you know, that was a local function of government, is to protect people, not a federal. I think we can agree on all of these as not federal functions.
So we all agree here. This is one of those things we all agree on.
What I would say is then we have to get down to what's happening at the local level. For example, education really is bad at the local level in most cases as well. And there's going to be, unless the government continues to get in the way, which I fear they're going to do, there's going to be a revolution in the next 20 years with information technology and so forth, and how children learn. To how we do education. If the government's out of the way, it's going to surprise people. But also remember about housing. Local governments are doing a lot of bad things. First of all, they make it incredibly expensive to build houses in places like California, where there's a humongous premium. They have the so-called smart growth regulations. That, you know, we think that, well, the reason why people move to the suburbs is, well, that's not good because they want big backyards for their kids. We want to pile them all into dense population centers. That's kind of one of the left's big thing. Some people like living in cities, live in a city. You like living in the suburbs and have a big backyard? Your choice. And the
so zoning, you would say, is not a state issue. It's a county or municipal issue.
And by the way, I would also add this. I am for private property rights, meaning that there are severe limits on what the government can tell you to do with your property. And if you look at a lot of the regulatory abuse at the state level, it's these sorts of things where the government is coming in and say, okay, I know it's your property and your land, and I know you're not bothering anybody else, but we, the paternalists, know what's good, and so we're going to force you to do X, Y, and Z. So the abuses of liberty go down to the local level as well.
Now, do you think, and here's one for you, because we're going to wrap this one up, on the local level. You know, I am not somebody that will go all the way off the cliff of nihilism. If somebody says, I want to put a porno shop next to your kid's nursery school on the local level, I'm going to have something to say about it. And if somebody says, well, you know, if people in the community don't want to shop there, the business will go out. Yeah, but if they're coming from the other communities because they don't want it in their backyard, on the local level, I want my mayor to say, you know, we're not zoning you to put that there. you can go on the other side of the interstate where the warehouses are and put it there if you want. That's not an infringement on somebody's rights. Again, designing our local communities, proper application of the powers of government.
That's an infringement on somebody's rights.
The distinction is
that rights aren't absolute. That's why we're looking for where they are.
The distinction that I think you're making that is important is that local government does have the right to protect us from one another. What it is increasingly doing is it's protecting us from ourselves, and that is where the violation comes in. I do believe that the state has a right to stop me from talking on a cell phone so I don't run you over, but it has no right to make me wear a seatbelt. That's insane.
Maybe we'll have to fight about that.
All right. Well,
that sounds exciting.
We're going to wrap up by figuring out how do we undo the stranglehold of big government next.
The establishment has tried and failed to copy the FreedomWorks model. Why? Because they don't understand how freedom works. So while they were sleeping, we were planning our hostile takeover. It's about the politics of we the people. So get a copy of Hostile Takeover and learn how to take back your liberty today. Get your exclusive excerpt before the book goes on sale by going to www.hostiletakeoverbook.com.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we actually started.
You have?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start?
Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market?
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth. So when she's ready for college, the money will be there. And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
Hi, I'm Joe Gray with the GoJo Hands-Free, the only device on Earth that's truly hands-free. These things are not hands-free. You stick them in your ears, gross, but you still have to hold your phone. And these are not legal for hands-free driving. The GoJo goes on in 1 second. Hello? 1 Mississippi. Hey Mom, I can't talk right now. And it works with all phones. Flip phones, cordless phones, even landlines. And pop it off. Any phone, big or small, even the most radical moves won't knock it off. The GoJo goes on with 1 hand, so you can keep your eyes on the road. I love it.
It's true hands-free.
Call now and I'll send you 2 GoJos for just $10. And I'll throw in my Super Grip mat absolutely free. It grips and holds your phone, music player, or anything else you can think of. Call now and I'll double the entire offer. Just pay processing and handling. That's 4 GoJos and 2 Super Grip mats for just $10.
2 order for $10 plus processing and handling. Call 1-800-549-7012 or order online at gojohandsfree.com.
The recall of Scott Walker failed miserably, but that doesn't mean all recalls are a bad idea. Today, without expressed or even inferred permission from Glenn Beck, the Glenn Beck program launches a bold initiative to recall 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey has been described as mediocre porn for frustrated housewives, but yet it dominates the Amazon.com book rankings. Currently, the #1 book is 50 Shades of Grey, Book 1 of the 50 Shades trilogy. Number 2 is 50 Shades Darker, Book 2 of the 50 Shades trilogy. Number 3 is 50 Shades Freed, Book 3 of the 50 Shades trilogy. And even number 4 is 50 Shades Trilogy, the 3-volume boxed set. America, this must stop. Here is our completely self-serving action plan. 1. Buy Cowards from Glenn Beck at Amazon.com. 2. Sit back and watch a Skanky Tales of S&M written by your mom finally drops out of the top of the bestseller list. Recall 50 Shades of Grey by getting your copy of Cowards at Amazon today. Stop the tyranny of 50 Shades of Grey.
Resist, we must, and we will much be committed.
You know, a promo is really funny when the entire panel is laughing. That's something we all agree upon. That promo is very funny. I want to move the conversation to the idea of limited versus unlimited government. It's no secret the current administration is trying the hardest to nudge itself into every aspect of our lives. You could see that just by looking at drones flying over our head. Allies and supporters of Obama push him to take action outside the approval of Congress. But let's face it, he doesn't need that kind of pressure. So,
with or without this Congress, I will keep taking actions that help the economy grow. But I can do a whole lot more with your help. Because when we act together, there's nothing the United States of America can achieve.
Wow, that sounds like si se puede. Yes, we can. We could do it, or I can do it. I'm all alone. This Article 2 says I can do whatever I want.
Arrogance.
Now I'm back with my panel. How do we unravel the mess of big government? I think what we're going to wrap this panel with at the end of the program is we all agree. We disagree maybe on some things on the local level. We might disagree on certain social issues. But we agree that the federal government, this big, bloated monster, is completely out of control. And now how do we undo it?
I think the first thing is how we frame the arguments. If you read Atlas Shrugged, you kind of get the moral idea of how you go about doing this. Picture Atlas, the giant holding up the world, suffering, saying, okay, you want to abuse me? You think I'm an exploiter? Screw you. We're in a civil war right now in this country between the producers and the expropriators. Those who try to make a living, whether they're a carpenter or a bricklayer or an investment banker, et cetera, by their own means, and those who expropriate through the tax system and so forth, with bailouts and so forth. The reason why the system is perpetuated as the sanction of the victim is because the good people, it's because the producers put up with it and say, well, you know, I certainly see where the government maybe has to provide a little bit of this and a little bit of that and so forth, and they let themselves be made victims. Look at Mitt Romney when Newt Gingrich, of all people, was bashing him from the left about making money, and how Romney said, well, golly, gee whiz, you know, I don't know, maybe I'll release my tax. It's the fact is that if you accept that you are guilty because you're a producer, because you're a productive, responsible individual, and think that you have to apologize, and the businesses have to apologize for making this in the richest country in the world, that's the moral decay in this country. Producers have to stand up and say, it is my right to run my life, my business, and so forth, the way I see fit. It is not your business to tell me how to run my life, Mr. Politician. It's not your business to take my money and redistribute it. Get the hell out. We have to take the moral high ground. That is how the only way we can get out of this is to take the moral high ground and define the issue differently in moral terms.
All right, George.
And I don't even think
this is the stuff that you're going to take to the RNC Finance Committee.
No,
right?
no, look,
I was on this TV show, and these guys are just beating the hell out.
No, look, the bottom line is, you know, I agree with them, actually. But the message has to come across with facts, right? The facts that what we've done is not working, that the government is bloated, what it means to your household. $15,000 a year of government regulation is what your household is bearing, which is a lot of money. $138,000 per federal employee. Most Americans don't make that kind of money. When they get the facts, then you will get the swelling of the quiet people that he's referring to, the people that have taken it, the victims.
So that's
right?
why I
the
put this panel together, because this type of discussion needs to be had. I mean, people need to hash things out. They need to say, you know what, where does Scott Brown and Rand Paul agree? Where do Louis Gohmert and a guy like a Christopher Shays or Michael Steele agree? And that's what we need to do, because in the opening monologue, I talked about unions. Literally, their members are paying so they can give that money to environmentalist groups who are shutting down their job sites. You've got feminists who have filed massive lawsuits to force colleges and universities to carry a women's studies program. But when you ask them about producing 4 male eyewitnesses to bring a rape charge, that's culture. What do you mean it's... So we figured out that regardless of some of their ridiculous reasons for they shouldn't be with one another, they all want big, massive, bloated government. And no matter what we say or do, they're going to keep pushing to grow this government, and it's up to people like us. It's up to people who start at the center, go off to the right, and to say, okay, we're not going to agree on everything. It's impossible. We can't agree on everything. We're going to have personal conflicts on certain issues, on social issues, on local issues, on producer issues. But in the end, if we say, you know what, we got to get this overarching federal government out of our lives, stop it from redistributing our wealth, stop it from taking our liberties away, and then we can argue on state and local levels, we can argue amongst ourselves. That's the way it ought to be. I want to thank the entire panel for joining me tonight. And Glenn, by the way, that Lincoln is on your desk. Glenn is back tomorrow with a special show for Father's Day. From Dallas, I'm Andrew Wilkow. You have a good night. I think this all worked out. I think it worked out.
Breaking news tonight. We've got real news. This just in.
Real news from The Blaze.
Welcome to Real News from The Blaze. Let's just get this thing started right away with the president's campaign reboot and some new statistics about the middle class. And what I'm talking about is the middle class squeeze. I'm sure you guys saw the stories that the middle class, according to the Federal Reserve, it was ugly, but now it's put some more warts on it. And I want to go through some of the statistics about that. Some key findings that from 2007 to 2010, the Great Recession as it's called, median net worth went down 39%. So that was 2 decades of assets wiped out in the Great Recession. Statistic number 2, the median value of a family's stake in their home, that went down 42%, as we know, with the housing collapse. So now it's about $55,000 for each family. Median income, that fell 7.7% from $49,600 in 2007 to $45,800 in 2010. So we see all of these indicators that the middle class squeeze is real and over the Great Recession significant. Well, I want to play a clip of President Obama today in Ohio addressing the middle class.
I believe that you can't bring down the debt without a strong and growing economy. And I believe you can't have a strong and growing economy without a strong and growing middle class. This has to be our North Star. An economy that's built not from the top down, but from a growing middle class. That provides ladders of opportunity for folks who aren't yet in the middle class.
So the news articles about President Obama's speech today, they all warned us he wasn't going to actually unveil any new plans. He was rebooting the campaign, rebooting and refocusing on the middle class. But as we all know, this is not a new tactic for politicians. Politicians are always talking about the middle class. That's always who they're trying to target. And I want to take us back down memory lane and listen to even George Bush Sr., the well-known Northeast aristocrat, addressing just this very issue when it came to his challenger, Bill Clinton.
In Arkansas, Bill Clinton raised state taxes, and not just on the rich. He increased the sales tax by 33%, imposed a mobile home tax, increased the beer tax. He assessed a tourism tax, created a cable TV tax, supported a tax on groceries. And now, if elected president, Bill Clinton has promised to increase government spending $220 billion. Guess where he'll get the money?
So do any of us think that George Bush Sr. knew anyone who lived in a mobile home? I don't think so. But he wanted people who did to know that he had their back. Of course, Bill Clinton won that campaign in 1992. And as never someone at a groping for words moment, here's what Bill Clinton had to say about that win.
I remind you again tonight, my fellow Americans, that this victory was more than a victory of party. It was a victory for the people who work hard and play by the rules.
Which was, of course, one of his main campaign slogans in 1992. If you work hard and play by the rules, you should have a decent life in America. And Ovik, I want to bring in your expertise to talk about the middle class and if people work hard and play by the rules, do they have a decent chance at a decent life here in America? If you were to listen to the left, President Obama today in Ohio, but frankly, over, say, the past 3 decades, they say middle class incomes have been flat. What is your response to that?
Well, I think Clinton actually had the right formulation. It was a very effective formulation to say the people who work hard and play by the rules, those are the people. That's essentially a conservative formulation. It's a formulation that says we're not asking for special favors. We're just trying to be rewarded for the work that we put into things. And that's exactly the opposite of what Obama wants. Obama wants to create new entitlements. The people who work hard and play by the rules are the ones who are most under assault in the current, in the Obama economy, because if you played by the rules and paid your mortgage, you're punished. If you defaulted on your mortgage, you're rewarded. If you played by the rules and tried to create a business, you're punished. If you played by the rules and tried to be responsible, you're punished, right? So the people who are rewarded in the Obama economy are crony capitalists. It's through loose monetary policy. It's people who gambled on flipping homes, people who exploited loose credit and loose lending regulations. Those are the people who are benefiting from this economy, and that's why the middle class today feels so insecure. The Stan Greenberg, James Carville memo from yesterday, I think, was very telling. They interviewed a lot of middle class, independent swing voters in suburban Philadelphia and Ohio, and those voters are very frustrated. The ad that Obama runs saying, well, we bailed out the auto companies. They look at that ad and they say, well, that's great for the people who work for the auto industry, but what about me? That doesn't help me at all.
It's good for the unions, actually,
yeah,
as well.
Right,
exactly.
but Ovik, I do want to focus in just really quickly because I'm always so kind of baffled by this talking point, and the Center for American Progress, the center-left think tank in Washington, D.C., run by John Podesta, they use it, President Obama draws from it, that this income inequality that we've seen, particularly skyrocketing over the last 5 years, is really a consequence of middle-class stagnation, and that the middle class is not succeeding. Rising tides are not lifting all boats, and I want to show you this graph here. Starting in 1979, it's rather close, and then as time goes on, wider and wider, the green line representing the top 1%, the bottom 2 representing the middle classes, and you see that green line spiking way up while the yellow and the red line stay relatively flat. Is this something that is real and that we should be concerned about?
It's real, but it's not something we should be as concerned about as people think. There's less income inequality during recession. There's more when the economy is strong, particularly in a global economy like we live in now. The entrepreneurs, the innovators of today make a lot more money than they did in 1950 because they sell their products all around the world. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, it's everywhere. Apple is everywhere. The iPhone is everywhere. Whereas if Steve Jobs existed 50 years ago, he'd only be selling it to Americans. And so that difference is part of the reason why innovators and entrepreneurs do make a lot more money. But the real question is, does the middle class get richer on an absolute scale? Are middle class Americans today wealthier than they were in 1950? And they are, because yes, their wages have increased, maybe not as much as we would like, but the cost of their lives has gone down considerably. Food costs less, technology costs less, automobiles cost less, healthcare costs a lot more, and that's a big pressure on middle-class wage growth in the last 10, 15 years.
You're absolutely right that wealth has grown on an absolute level, but you're focusing on the exact right thing. This growing inequality is something that feeds political desires, and it's fed by a couple things. As you said, over the last 3 decades, there has been some level of wage stagnation, and there's been some level of persistent unemployment. Out of every recession, we've come back never quite achieving the level of unemployment we had before that. Now, why is that? Well, Democrats will give you one answer and Republicans will give you another. Democrats will suggest because Reagan lowered taxes on the rich and wealth started to shift to the higher end of the income spectrum. I would submit to you that it's because we've been in a transitional economy for some 30 or 40 years where we've moved away from manufacturing and we're moving toward we don't quite know exactly what. But that has left behind some wage stagnation and unemployment. Why am I saying this? Because it's important politically, because politicians want the middle class vote. And whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican, the tool they have used has been exactly the same. They have fed credit. They have shoved credit to the American populace for 30 years as to appease them, to make them feel like everything is okay. Whether or not that's easy credit for your home or it's easy credit on down the food chain, they have shoved credit, and guess what? That has come to an end, and it's by that one statistic you put up. The Americans' net household worth has dropped by 40% in 4 years. The good times are over, and how the politicians appease us going forward, big, fat question mark.
You know, there's a big story here because we're talking about the problems in the middle class, and you mentioned globalization. Well, I think that part of the problem of the American middle class is because our economy has been globalized, and that has helped the top 1%, and it's helped others, but it hasn't helped the middle class. And so you have issues, I think, that are really worldwide in scope that are affecting the American presidential race. And the candidates, neither Obama nor Romney, are really talking about them. Because what we're seeing, in 2008, where problems around the world affected, of course, the American presidential election, the Republicans out. And this time around, Europe could really come back and hammer the president. So no matter what he does, he could actually really lose big time because of what's going on around the world.
From watching the two speeches given, Obama's and Romney's, it was really a battle of platitudes. It was amazing at how little substance was put in either speech. And you're hearing free market, freedom from Romney. And he needs to smile more. And you're hearing, let's just throw that out there.
He did cut down on the military.
And you're also hearing from Obama, the middle class. I'm all about the middle class. There was so little in terms of specifics here, and I just think that as this goes forward and goes on, you can see a few things starting to happen. One, it looks less credible, I think, now than it ever has before for Barack Obama to be saying he's focusing so much on the middle class, because look what he did when he could get away with whatever he wanted in terms of having both sides of the Congress. He didn't focus on, say, helping people who are underwater in their mortgages. He didn't make moves that would actually benefit necessarily the middle class. He focused on Obamacare, he focused on cap and trade, and so I think right now the pivot is just a function not of any great philosophy, but the fact that he just wants to get elected, and it's so obvious. Anyway.
I think he also, interestingly enough, tried to paint himself as a doer. He's somebody who's going to do something. Now, of course, that means more entitlements, it means more spending, it means more taxes, it means all things that we hate. But he brought in some interesting things about Romney. Well, Romney just wants to sit back and let the free market take care of anything.
Bad free market.
Bad free market. And I think that also set up an alternate vision in terms of what we were talking about yesterday, even in terms of, government and two completely different philosophies.
Isn't it a problem, though, when you look at Mitt Romney's plan, as we did yesterday, that the #1 item on day one that he's proposing is to cut corporate taxes by 25%.
No.
That's not about
Here's
the middle
why
class.
that's not a no. Here's why that's not a problem. You and I have essentially made the same point. You point to globalization, I call it a transitioning economy. The question is, if the middle class needs to advance in this society going into the future through globalization, a future that looks like globalized transitioned economy, who ushers the middle class to a better life in that world, in that transitioned world? Is it through a world with freer economics where corporations are free to pursue what's next, or is it through entitlement?
It's very simple. Who employs people?
Yeah, exactly.
Are people employed by, that tree over there? No, they're employed by corporations.
You don't know what the economy is like, and I don't know what the economy is like, but we know we need to incentivize the guys who might find that out.
But policy-wise, it's not a problem. PR-wise, it can be a problem, which means you have to get out there, just like Will just did, and explain it. Mitt Romney can't just
You're losing when you're explaining. That's the problem.
He has to explain why that makes him an ally of the middle class as well. He can't just let the left control the narrative and paint him as such.
The focus on the public sector also tells you really a lot, because there's a clear understanding.
That's all he knows.
That is all that he knows.
That's all he knows.
The idea that firefighters and teachers are somehow going to pull America out of a recession. Teachers can't hire anybody, as far as I know. And firefighters maybe can hire a few more, but that's not obviously going to turn the economy around. But he just doesn't know what needs to be done.
Well, it was very telling in the Federal Reserve Bulletin that came out this month with all these statistics about the middle class. Whoever wrote this report is not a friend of Obama's, because they said that the legislative responses to the middle class crisis: #1, extending the Bush tax cuts; #2, cutting the employee payroll tax; 3 is TARP; and 4 is Dodd-Frank. Nowhere on that list was stimulus. So I thought that was fascinating that the Fed does not credit the stimulus.
They actually try to say now that the stimulus is not part of. There have been graphics that have been circulating that say that this is not Barack Obama spending. That this was sort of inherited. They actually now start after
the stimulus that was passed by Nancy Pelosi.
They have been trying to do that. They've been trying to put that, to hang that around Bush's neck, which is amazing.
Here's the strategy from the Obama administration as we move forward. It's 3 points. It's blame Congress as being obstructionist. It's blame Bush. And then it's demonize Romney as trying to continue the policies of Bush that he's going to claim led us to this mess. That's all he has.
All right.
We invite you in and we do all the talking.
Can't
shut us up.
Thanks so much. Hearts and minds of the middle class. When we come back, Buck helps us answer the question, just who is Eric Holder? Stay with us.
MyPatriotSupply.com presents LifeStraw. With LifeStraw, you can immediately and safely drink water like this and like this. LifeStraw is the ultra-lightweight personal water purifier that has been turning heads and saving lives since 2005. With a patented set of filters, you can drink directly from contaminated floodwaters and from ponds, lakes, and streams anywhere in the world without worry. Get LifeStraw now at MyPatriotSupply.com. Clean water from virtually any source on sale today at MyPatriotSupply.com.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack of all trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
Is your belt too small? Wish there was an easy way to punch a hole? Well, now you can punch a perfect hole in seconds with RotoPunch. Wrong belt size? No problem. Just squeeze the handle and RotoPunch instantly makes the perfect fit. Is your purse strap too long? Fixing it is easy. Just squeeze for a perfect hole in seconds. Punching a hole has never been easier. Just pick a size and punch for an extra hole instantly. But hold everything, we're also including our snap and eyelet attachment free. Now worn-out snaps and eyelets can be replaced quickly and easily. We'll even include 75 assorted snaps and eyelets free. Call now to get the RotoPunch with the snap and eyelet tool, plus 75 assorted eyelets and snaps today for only $10. But wait, order now and get a second RotoPunch system free. Just pay separate processing and handling. Call now.
To order RotoPunch for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-919-4516. That's 1-800-919-4516 or order online at rotopunch.com. Call or log on now.
Who is Eric Holder? Welcome back, everybody. Got some key questions to look at here. The fact of the matter is right now there is a negotiation going on between Attorney General Eric Holder and the Congress, and it looks like there's a meeting scheduled for Monday between the Attorney General and Darrell Issa, Congressman Issa, to figure out what should be done about the documents that have not been shared yet with the Congressional Committee that are part of the Fast and Furious investigation. What we've seen so far is a sort of tit-for-tat back and forth, and the Attorney General and the Department of Justice has stood strong, saying, we will not release these documents. Well, now they're starting to crack a little bit. They're saying that they're going to have a meeting to discuss whether they will disclose all this information about Operation Fast and Furious. But it raises larger issues here, because even if this were to somehow be settled, and by the way, I don't think it will be. I think that there'll be a limited release, and a lot of stuff will be kept back under either executive privilege or under the guise of it being part of an ongoing investigation. So I don't think that the committee, the Congressional Committee, Oversight Committee, is going to get the things that it wants out of this, and so this will continue. However, putting that aside for a second, there are broader issues when you're talking about Attorney General Eric Holder. This is not the first scandal he has been involved in by a long shot. There actually is a long history of scandals with the Attorney General, and I want to put up well, first, let's put up what Darrell Issa has said recently about where he stands on the issue of Fast and Furious. Let me be clear. If the Department of Justice submits a serious proposal for how it intends to alter its refusal to produce critical documents subpoenaed by the committee, I am ready and willing to meet to discuss your proposal. Okay, so it looks like they're trying to play nice. But when we put this in the context of looking at Holder's entire record, you can see, we should put up a timeline of this. You see a long history. Let's just go through a few of these. 1999, FALN clemency. The Attorney General, well, he wasn't the Attorney General then, but Holder, Eric Holder at the time, decided to be involved in pardoning 16 Puerto Rican separatist terrorists who were part of a group that was involved in 6 American citizens being killed over a period of years. And then in 2000, there was the Mark Rich pardon, January of 2001. This smelled to high heaven for most people because Mark Rich was a financier. He's a fugitive from justice for 17 years. Usually pardons are for people who have actually gone through the justice system, not people who have evaded it entirely and then just get off scot-free. So he was pardoned, and his wife gave $1.3 million to Democrats in that same year. A lot of people thought that that was completely egregious, Democrat and Republican. Of course, there was the New Black Panther Party voter intimidation case, which was dismissed, and it was dismissed primarily for lack of evidence, although we should play a clip to show some of the things that were going on involving this case. right here, this is outside of a polling station in Philadelphia. You can see two individuals dressed in new Black Panther Party garb. One of them is holding a nightstick. And allegedly they were yelling intimidating things to people who were going in to vote, which one would think would imply there was voter intimidation going on. But I digress. If we put the timeline back up for a second, of course, Operation Fast and Furious 2010, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed. His family has yet to see justice, and that is what brought us to this impasse right now between Congress and Attorney General Holder. The contempt proceedings scheduled for June 20th. I think that if I had to play this out, I would assume that Eric Holder will somehow avoid the contempt proceeding, but that this will continue on. But we should bring in somebody who might have an even clearer idea of this. I want to bring in former U.S. Justice Department official and author of Injustice, Exposing the Racial Agenda of the Obama Justice Department, Christian Adams. Christian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Christian, we've laid out here quite a list of things that the Attorney General has been involved in over the years that certainly raise eyebrows. And when you're talking about the Attorney General, this is the senior-most lawyer in the United States government. He runs the Department of Justice. You would think that he should be as nonpartisan as possible, but what we see here is somebody who both seems to have poor judgment at times and also is hyper-partisan. Why is it that he maintains his role in the Department of Justice? Why has he not resigned yet?
Well, because he knows how to fight. Eric Holder is very different than Alberto Gonzales, for example. He realizes it's a blood sport, and for him to resign will hurt the administration badly, so that's not going to happen. It's worse than you say. I mean, this isn't just politics. He's radicalized the Justice Department. I brought the new Black Panther case. There was plenty of evidence. So he has really pushed the Justice Department
Christian,
in a radical direction.
If you would please tell us what was the evidence involved in that case, and how did that go down? Why was it dismissed? We'd love to hear.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, the evidence was vast. There were sworn statements from multiple eyewitnesses who said that the Panthers attempted to block their entrance. You saw the video. America has seen the video. That's not supposed to happen in America. The Panthers didn't even respond to the case. They were in default. They never replied to the lawsuit, and the case was ordered dismissed. So it wasn't for lack of evidence. It was because radicals have taken over the Justice Department.
And what do you think of the contempt proceedings? Do you think that Attorney General Holder will comply with the congressional requests for those documents, or can you see this thing just for the cat and mouse game playing out even further?
Well, if passed as prologue, this Justice Department will do just enough to get itself out of hot water with Congress, and I think you'll see some sort of concession. Next week, the Attorney General is slated to meet with members of Congress, but this administration has been the least transparent administration in history, not the most, and they have failed to turn over lots of documents relating to Fast and Furious. In fact, they did the exact same thing in the new Black Panther dismissal. They stonewalled Congress there also.
Hey, Christian, Amy here. Richard Cohen, the liberal columnist for the Washington Post, he wrote way back in December of 2008 when Eric Holder was being nominated for, or considered for Attorney General, that Eric Holder was a totally inappropriate choice because of the Mark Rich pardon. Quote, any person is entitled to make a mistake, but no one is entitled to be Attorney General. That's a post that ought to be reserved for a lawyer who appreciates that while he reports to the president, he serves the people. So this was a liberal columnist at the Washington Post. How is it that Eric Holder has basically been able to escape this judgment?
Well, let me explain what's going on. And it's not just Fast and Furious. It's not just the new Black Panthers. This Attorney General has implemented a progressive, radicalized agenda all throughout the department. It's not just the things that are on the front page of the Washington Post or at the Blaze. It's a series of policy decisions, whether it's re-examining the CIA interrogation memos in order to scare our heroes who are on the front lines on the war on terror, whether it's doing what Eric Holder is doing to Florida right now and fighting to keep foreigners on the voter rolls there. So it's a series of decisions beginning essentially on day one. And so the reason that this is tolerated is because it's part of the progressive agenda of this administration, and Holder is really at the helm of the most powerful agency in the government to implement this agenda. You don't implement this agenda at the Agriculture Department. You do it at the Justice Department.
Christian, Jedediah here. With respect to Holder not giving these documents over, he keeps using this executive privilege nonsense. I'm hearing that that's absolutely not okay. He can't do that, that it's not acceptable. Only the president is allowed to use that as an excuse. Can you just solidify that for me?
Sure. Executive privilege, and this same exact issue came up with the new Black Panther case. The executive privilege is sort of a relic from the king, where the president asserts executive privilege that these documents, are wholly within the purview of the executive branch, and Congress doesn't have power to obtain them. Everything else is fair game. Only the president can exert executive privilege. Eric Holder cannot. And what this Justice Department has attempted to get away with in the new Black Panther case and now in Fast and Furious is to assert sort of a quasi-executive privilege, something that's almost executive privilege, but really isn't. And Congress sees through that, and I don't expect them to tolerate this much longer.
Christian, Gordon Chang, I sort of believe that Holder is the worst Attorney General in living memory. But the question is,
Worse than Janet Reno?
Yes, I think for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And certainly he's much less appealing than Janet Reno, which goes a lot.
More shocking.
But the point is, do the American people care? I mean, and in this election cycle, what we really have are some overarching issues. For instance, the economy, which we just talked about, and some other things that could occur around the world. So is it really that Holder is stonewalling not only Congress but the American people because he knows he can get away with it and nobody really cares because of these other issues?
Well, you know, on the other issues, what happens when the economy ticks up in September and October? Are we then content to have an administration with a radical agenda, a corrupt attorney general who defies the orders of Congress? So really what I think you see happening is a slow realization of things that the conservative media has been talking about for years about this administration. It started, frankly, with the terror policies, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's trial, the new Black Panthers, and now more and more people are starting to realize this guy's out of touch. This guy is not what an attorney general ought to be. I do think he's the worst attorney general, maybe the Harding attorney general in the Teapot Dome scandal, whose name I can't even remember. He might have been a little worse. But look, give me back Janet Reno. This guy is way worse than Janet Reno.
Christian hits on a key point here, too, which is that he's also shown bad judgment, I think, in his role. I think we have plenty of evidence that this is a guy, he said that the KSM trial should happen in the Southern District of New York, and then immediately had to backtrack off of that for a variety of reasons. And he's even expressed some ideas in terms of his philosophy, his legal philosophy, that could be troubling. I want to play, we have a clip of him talking about what judicial process is versus due process. Put that up.
Some have argued that the president is required to get permission from a federal court before taking action against a United States citizen who is a senior operational leader of al-Qaeda or associated forces. This is simply not accurate. Due process and judicial process are not one and the same, particularly when it comes to national security. The Constitution guarantees due process. It does not guarantee judicial process.
Pretty stark words, Christian. Does this Department of Justice, at least at the top, view the Constitution as sort of a suggestion?
Well, that's a great point, and that goes to my larger message that this administration is infusing a radicalized vision of the law. Sometimes it shows up as concrete policies, like attacking Florida's voter roll cleanup, but other times it's more philosophical. And what you hear there is a philosophical agenda where the government sort of has this power to decide the matters of life and death. Look, this is an area where he actually has angered his left-wing base, but he's once again followed his tendency of big government power. So it's a great example of philosophy and policy merging.
Hey, Christian, Will, we've only got a few seconds left, but I just want to ask you this. I think if Attorney General Eric Holder were sitting here, in fact, I know, he would say this. Look, it's a political position. It's not just a judicial position. And every attorney general has an ideology, has a politics, and that's going to come through. And your answer to that is what?
And it should. Elections have consequences.
Right.
But when you engage in lawless conduct, and I've written about it extensively at PJ Media, when lawless events take place, when you defy Congress, when you radicalize the department, that's different than politics. And this Attorney General is not like Janet Reno, totally political. This Attorney General is radical and lawless, and that's what I think you're seeing in Fast and Furious.
Christian, thanks so much for joining us. Up next, guys, tonight's top 3.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
It's an unpredictable world. Disaster can strike at any time. That's why Stove in a Can should always be part of your emergency survival plan. With power out and gas lines down, Stove in a Can cooks your food and rapidly boils water. Portable, safe, and easy to use. With an all-natural, waterproof fuel source you can store indefinitely. Say goodbye to dangerous propane, lighter fluid, and gas. Don't wait until it's too late. Stock up today and protect your family. Special bundle offers available at stoveinacan.com.
If you're a diabetic and currently trying to lose weight, please stay tuned to this important message. A market trial offer is starting now for a revolutionary breakthrough in weight loss called glucosilin, and you are eligible to try it free for 30 days. Clinical studies of the key ingredient have shown this ingredient to be effective in accelerating weight loss. What's even more impressive is that it also supports healthy blood sugar metabolism at the same time. Call immediately to receive your free 30-day trial. 1-888-433-8171.
Our very own Essie Cupp makes the front page of theblaze.com tonight, but will she also be part of the top 3 stories as determined by you? We'll find out from the site's editor-in-chief, Scott Baker. Hey, Scott.
Well, Amy, I think you're onto something there as far as what might be in the top 3. And I have to tell you, I had just prepared to talk about the top 3, and the number 3 one just changed. I'm going to stick with the one that I had ready. The one that just surged was Charles Krauthammer, who's always good to listen to. But just want to make sure that we tell you, if you missed the clip of Michelle Malkin on Hannity last night, talking with Juan Williams, where Juan Williams makes the mistake of claiming that he's a real reporter as opposed to those bloggers out there on the blogosphere. That didn't sit real well with Michelle Malkin, who accused the real journalists of covering up for the corruptocracy as she sees it. You'll want to see that clip. Number 2 story, and then now the number 1 story. So the number 2 story is Rush Limbaugh. And as you know, the president gave a talk on the economy today. And Rush gave a real thorough analysis of that speech that involved basically hysterical laughter for over a very extended period of time. And that is great fun to listen to, and that's why it's number 2 on the Blaze right now. Number 1 story on the Blaze right now, as you indicated, Essie Cupp. Essie Cupp was on MSNBC today, and the issue was gun control. The issue was, in fact, it was ammo control and putting casings on bullets that can be tracked back to a gun and a particular owner. And the gun control advocate that was voicing support for this idea probably didn't realize what he was in store in dealing with a gun owner, as the MSNBC host said as they referred to Essie. Essie, she takes this on point by point. This is a pretty tense exchange, and we have a clip.
How is this an assault on the Second Amendment, saying that we want to put microstamping on a bullet casing that will help us catch criminals after they've committed it? How is that an assault on your Second Amendment rights?
Because most gun owners that are legal gun owners use their guns legally and do not want to have to be tracked as if they are criminals.
I think you can guess why that is the number 1 story on the Blaze. Number 1, and I guess this would be a pun to use the old radio phrase, number 1 with a bullet. My story to boost for you tonight, remember the crying guy, the one that was on CNN with Wolf Blitzer after Governor Walker won the special vote, and he said that democracy had died? He's back. I know you said, could we get more of the crying guy? And he's on radio, on a couple of radio stations. And we've assembled this all into one post. Just search crying on the Blaze, and that will take you right to it. You don't want to miss it.
All right. Thanks, Scott. It seems that men crying always makes news.
Yes,
a coup in Egypt. Well, Will Kane is going to take us through the alarming details right after the break.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack of all trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
The establishment has tried and failed to copy the FreedomWorks model. Why? Because they don't understand how freedom works. So while they were sleeping, we were planning our hostile takeover. It's about the politics of we the people. So get a copy of Hostile Takeover and learn how to take back your liberty today. Get your exclusive excerpt before the book goes on sale by going to www.hostiletakeoverbook.com.
By age 5, I could drain a three-pointer. By 8, I could outplay opponents twice my size. By 10, I knew someday I would make the pros. Focus, dedication, determination. These are the things that have prepared me for today. But for what tomorrow might bring, I prepared with Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply. It gives me the confidence to face any opposition. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
MyPatriotSupply.com presents LifeStraw. With LifeStraw, you can immediately and safely drink water like this and like this. LifeStraw is the ultra-lightweight personal water purifier that has been turning heads and saving lives since 2005. With a patented set of filters, you can drink directly from contaminated floodwaters and from ponds, lakes, and streams anywhere in the world without worry. Get LifeStraw now at MyPatriotSupply.com. Clean water from virtually any source on sale today at MyPatriotSupply.com.
Welcome back to Real News, where it appears, after I think 15 months, the revolution might be over in Egypt. In one fell swoop, the Egyptian Constitutional Court basically dissolved Parliament. The only democratic institution in Egypt has been dissolved in one day's worth of judgments from this court. Egypt's Constitutional Court made two decisions today. First of all, they sanctioned Shafiq. I'm forgetting his first name. Ahmed Shafiq, who was seen as basically an administration or a Mubarak regime candidate as a presidential candidate, something that Parliament was looking to stand in the way of. They were going to try to stand in the way of Shafiq being an official candidate for the elections this Saturday. That was one ruling from the court today, that he could be a candidate. The second was that all you guys thinking about standing in the way of his candidacy, you're no longer needed. Basically, dissolving Parliament's existence today. Now, I have no idea what this means for the future of Egypt. And I don't know who does, but I do know that Eric Traeger, our old friend from the Washington Institute that joins us often here at this table, knows more than I do about this. So I want to go straight to Eric, and we can ask Eric some questions, and we can all try to figure out what Egypt's future looks like. Eric, can we start here? I don't think our viewers, I don't, fully understand Egyptian governance. What is the role of this constitutional court? Whose authority does it operate under? What is its relationship with this parliament? And our best analogy would be to picture how our government works with three branches of government. Can you tell us kind of how Egypt has been operating, at least over the past year, as far as governance?
Well, sure, and thanks for having me. Basically, the Supreme Constitutional Court is a relatively, everything is relative, independent court in Egypt that is tasked with applying the Constitution. Now, there is no Constitution in Egypt. There is really a constitutional declaration, and the status of the Constitution is really quite vague. But what this court basically ruled today was that the parliamentary elections were conducted illegally. And I'm going to be very brief here, but here's why they were illegal. According to the parliamentary elections law that Egypt's military dictatorship created in October, 1/3 of the parliament was supposed to be reserved for independents, that is, people not affiliated with parties. Well, you can imagine that the parties weren't happy about this, and in the end, the military dictatorship allowed political parties to contest again for this 1/3 of the seats that were supposed to be for independents only. However, the law was not changed to account for that. So essentially, 1/3 of the parliament was elected illegally because parties ran for seats that were supposed to be reserved for independents.
Now, but do we expect this parliament, which was largely made up of members of the Muslim Brotherhood, who were democratically elected, to just abide by this court's decision? I'm wondering what gives this court's decision weight. Is it because, you suggested it's an independent body, but is it because it has the military behind it?
Well, you know, as with everything in Egypt, it's sort of it depends, right? I mean, it depends on how Egyptian political actors respond to this, and frankly, what else is happening behind the scenes. Now, you're absolutely right to expect that the Muslim Brotherhood, which is going to pay the heaviest price for the dissolution of parliament since it controlled 47% of the parliament, you're right to expect the Brotherhood will respond unfavorably. However, there are reports that the Brotherhood is in negotiations with the military, which is why the Brotherhood's response today was actually very calm.
That's going to be what's interesting, guys. I know, Gordon, you want to get on this, but where does this go from here? What does the Muslim Brotherhood, how do they respond? And by the way, what effect does this have on the presidential elections scheduled for Saturday between one Muslim Brotherhood candidate and one guy who's seen as an extension of the previous regime?
And that's really the critical question, because even though the Muslim Brotherhood loses all these seats because of this ruling, I think, you know, it seems that they very well may be the biggest beneficiary, because going into this vote, which is supposed to be close, you basically have a lot of sympathy now for the party that has been ejected from Parliament, because Parliament is just completely gone.
But you're making a big assumption, Gordon, and that is that these elections will be legit. Well, that the military won't exercise some kind of authority over these presidential elections.
Yeah, and I think that
that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, this is a situation of it depends, right? It depends on whether public sympathy for the Brotherhood, first of all, is what follows, and secondly, whether that matters and whether the elections are run fairly at all. I mean, certainly the Brotherhood expects that the elections will not be held fairly. It's been saying that they won't be held fairly since March, when the Brotherhood first announced a candidate. So I think the Brotherhood might just be delaying its protests, but we don't really know. There are a lot of manipulations here behind the scenes.
But you know, the Brotherhood is not going to take a stolen election lightly, and I think everyone who's looked at this has said that the Brotherhood is going to make the military pay if the military steals this election. So I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but it would seem to me that what we've got is dynamic, where Shafiq, the military guy, is really the biggest loser of this ruling.
But how does the Brotherhood make them pay? I mean, what are we going to talk about here? It would have to take massive protests in the streets. I would suggest to you maybe even more than what we saw a year ago.
I think there's an important point here, which is, first of all, according to reports of these negotiations between the military and the Brotherhood, it seems like the Brotherhood is looking for assurances that it will be able to form the next cabinet. So I think what it's preparing for is a situation in which Shafiq is elected, but in which a Muslim brother is appointed prime minister and gets to appoint a few other ministers. Remember, the Brotherhood is, for now, domestically focused, and that would allow it to have real power on the domestic scene. So that's really kind of the first thing we have to look for in gauging their response.
Eric, I wanted to ask you, you know, Egypt has been through a coup process before. I'm not sure if you would necessarily, most people seem to be calling this a coup. You know, the free officer coup, which was supposed to transfer power to the people and then led to authoritarian military rule. What similarities do you see? I know that every historical period is different and people don't like analogies. What similarities do you see between this period in time right now, with the rising Islamist support among the Egyptian people, and the military, of course, looking like it's asserting more power, and the free officer coup, which led to Nasser and, of course, decades of authoritarian rule?
Well, I mean, you know, one of the major components of the 1952 coup and certainly the 2 years after that was that the new military regime outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood, which had previously been a legal and then semi-legal organization that was actually very, very public in Egypt. There's no sign right now that that's likely to happen, just given how prominent the Brotherhood has become on the streets since last year's revolution. And that's really why I think it's hard to draw those analogies. Now, certainly, the Muslim Brotherhood is very worried about a repeat of 1952, which is why I think it's fair to expect a strong response for them right now. But the cat is kind of out of the bag. Things have changed in Egypt very substantially since last year's revolution, and I think it would be very, very hard for even a Shafiq, to reassert Mubarak's rule or the military to reassert itself as it was able to do 60 years ago. I just think that's going to be very, very hard.
Well, Eric, you say things have changed very radically in the last year. I'm listening to this conversation about parliaments and Muslim Brotherhood and dissolving and coups and so forth, and I still don't have a clear idea. What do the Egyptian people want for their country? What are the basic governing principles that might unite them? Here in the United States, when we had a revolution, we wanted limited government, sovereignty, maximum personal freedom. Is that what Egyptians want?
Well, the problem is that Egyptians aren't really united around any one vision. I mean, what we get a sense of, certainly looking at the polls and reading the outcomes of these last elections, is that a large segment of the Egyptian public wants some sort of religious rule. I mean, I think that is actually very, very clear. And they define freedom as the freedom to live under a theocracy. And when you speak to Egyptians, that really comes across. They do not see freedom, or a certain segment doesn't see freedom the way we would see it. But the other thing that many Egyptians want is stability, is a return of a decent economy, domestic security, and that's really what Shafiq represents. And that's why this election, if it's conducted fairly, will give us the best sense we have of what Egyptians want, whether they want something that's more theocratic or something that's more stabilized. But either way, democracy in Egypt appears to be a far way off.
I'd have to say that, it seems like there's no way around there being a second round of parliamentary voting. But as Gordon raises, I would agree that this seems to make the Muslim Brotherhood look like it truly is the voice of the people, because there's just something very underhanded about this whole thing. Yes, as a matter of strict law, this 1/3 should have been set aside for independent candidates, but if we were sitting in Egypt and we had just voted and we had expectations of what that would be down the line, and also the timing of it, I have to say, is something we haven't really discussed, but right before this election, it just looks so manipulative and so much of a disregarding of the will of the Egyptian people. So this, I think, in the longer term, because we don't know when the elections, a second round of elections would happen for Parliament, assuming it will happen, this has got to benefit the Muslim Brotherhood as being the real voice of the people. I don't see a way around it.
If that's true, if the Muslim Brotherhood is a reflection of the real voice of the people, is that the situation that's the scariest for us in terms of our future dealings with Egypt?
I mean, but I think we also overlook the question of whether or not the will of the people matter. And we're overlooking the role of the military in this and what they might be directing behind the scenes. And I know you point out, Buck, that historical analogies are sometimes loose, and certainly when you're crossing international borders, but to me the one I think back to would be Turkey. I know that the Muslim Brotherhood looks at Turkey as their possible model. They suggest that they can follow this kind of moderate Islamic state, but what about the Turkey of 80 years ago, of Ataturk, of setting up this sort of deep state, military-run, behind-the-scenes secular society? And I'm wondering, and maybe Eric, you can answer this, if that's not what the military is envisioning. This sort of deep state.
No, Will, you're hitting on something that's very real, which is that basically everyone in Egypt talks about the Turkish model, but they mean very, very different things. For the Brotherhood, that's the Turkish model of 2003 on, where an Islamist party slowly removes a military regime or, autonomous military from power. But for the Egyptian military, it's the Turkish model pre-2003, where you have that autonomous military. Frankly, I think that neither is really possible because, first of all, Egypt's going to be very, very unstable for a while, given its economic situation, given the lack of foreign investment. So I don't think it's going to be so neat where a military can really just carve out a niche and retake power when Islamists rise. And secondly, just back to the economy, one of the things that benefited the AKP in Turkey was a strong economy, was their ability to show 11% growth. Nobody expects that in Egypt. What we're looking at in Egypt is not really a choice between a military regime or an Islamist rule, but really a mess. And the question, I think, for the U.S. is, how do you get policy done? How does Washington find what it needs in a country that will be contested for a very long time?
Well, it seems to me, too, that if there's not a unifying goal for the type of society that Egypt wants to move toward, then the institutions are going to be chaotic. That if you don't believe that every person has the right to, free speech and sovereign rule, what is a parliament if you can just dismiss the elections of, you know, the independents should be this number set aside in terms of a quota? What if they don't elect a third independents to be in the parliament?
Well, I think you're completely right. And I mean, I think that really just demonstrates the folly of having held elections, having, you know, invited political competition before having a constitution. A constitution represents the principles on which everyone can broadly agree, and the rules under which political competition can take place. If you don't have those rules in place, you're just going to have competition, and therefore the lack of agreement on what Egypt is trying to be that you just mentioned.
All right, Eric, thanks a lot, man. We always enjoy having you. Coming up,
thanks for having me.
The Island of Misfit Stories is next.
Before you hit the polls, see what makes candidate Glenn Beck unelectable.
If you find oil on Mount Rushmore, I will be the first to gladly drill through Teddy Roosevelt's head.
Glenn Beck and the BS of A take the stage for a brand new live comedy tour.
$2 for how much gas? We haven't established that yet. Those are details that you work out after you are elected.
It's unelectable too.
If I may just say, my opponent is a moron.
Because you might as well laugh before you cry. Visit glennbecktours.com for details.
The intersection of Hollywood and politics is usually a good place to find a misfit story. So, Buck, what did you find?
I don't know how many folks in our audience watch Game of Thrones.
I do.
If they don't, they should, because it is a phenomenal show, whether you like that sort of fantasy genre, Dungeons and Dragons, or not. But something came up recently, something pretty unexpected. A viewer found this. We just have to put up the picture and then I can describe what we're talking about. So there's a scene where they're showing some severed heads.
I see it. This is the first
Joffrey.
I see it.
And that severed head, now keep in mind, this is in the land of Westeros. This is a mythical place. This is when the king has gotten a little nasty, chopped up a bunch of heads. That head with the wig on it is George W. Bush. Now, this was pointed out to the executive producers of the show and the creators of the show, who immediately apologized, said that this was just one of those things where they just found some stuff lying around and were using severed heads, and it just happened to be one with... Now, they did put a wig on it.
The show, I think, is taped like in Ireland or something, so there were just George Bush dummy heads lying around.
I am not intimately familiar with the appropriations process for where they get
their prop master.
Plastic heads. Their prop master and I don't hang out. But I will say this. Pretty crazy to see that, sort of like an effigy of our former president's head on a spike, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And they've apologized, but it just goes to show you, you never know what's going to cause a little controversy. And Game of Thrones,
Buck, what's more disappointing?
Nobody's safe.
Season 2 or George Bush's head on a spike?
I thought season 2 was all right, Amy. I think
Really?
they're giving it a short shrift. It picked up at the end.
I'd go with the
Anyway.
head on a stick.
That's right.
It's going to go
Okay.
See, viewers might not know this, but I've had a long-standing debate, maybe you would call it a curiosity, about who is the guy that goes into the men's restroom and bypasses a perfectly good urinal to wander into the stall to do his business. And I've had that debate with various people around here, and Mike Opelka, a friend of ours at the Blaze, he taught me that many people go into the stall for hygienic reasons. To
Privacy.
to sit.
Of course.
So apparently the Swedish government and my head and Mike's head are all on the same page, because the Swedish government, or at least one politician in Sweden, is considering passing a law that requires all men to sit rather than stand when you do your business in the restroom.
Wow, that's some nanny state.
Obviously, when you're urinating.
Maybe for number one.
For number one,
they're
yes,
telling you.
yes. They have, apparently he's adopted this motto from daycare centers in Sweden that encourage little boys to be a sweetie and take a seatie. And he points out that not only is it more hygienic, but it also reduces the risk of prostate trouble. And thus, if you sit while relieving yourself, it contributes to a better and longer sex life.
You know, though, those little, you got to jiggle to flush the toilet. You got to touch that. I don't know if it's more hygienic.
Not exactly Nico McKeon ethics on tonight's E-Block.
I mean, one of the great advantages to being a male is that you can go anywhere.
You have options.
Right,
You have
exactly.
options.
Critics of the nanny state suggest this may be difficult to enforce.
Unless Big Brother gets really big.
So, Gordon, aren't you so glad you joined us tonight?
Absolutely.
What is your story?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the number one issue that has captured the imagination of the Chinese public is not the crumbling economy or the faltering Communist Party, but it's what people put in their tummy. It's the gutter oil issue of restaurants throwing out oil at the end of the day, accumulates in these pools, scavengers come around, gather it up, take off the scum, lighten the color, probably by peeing in it, and selling it to other restaurants.
I like the way you just pointed at Will.
Yeah, right. Our expert on urination.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's the question of what you put in your tummy, which is really getting people in China motivated to talk about things. Well, I want to talk about what I put in my tummy when we were living in Shanghai. Winter, very, very cold. And it's, you know, the point where I'm just freezing all the time. So my friend from Citibank said, look, I'm going to take you to a restaurant out near the airport, and you're going to have B soup, because the menu is divided into A and B. And on the B side, they got B soup. So I got B soup. It's sort of clear broth with something big in it. So, you know, like everybody else, I go, get to the bottom, and the thing's there. So I put my hand on it, start chomping on it. Well, my friends just break out in hysterical laughter, and I can't figure out why. And they say, okay, what you've just eaten is the penis of a bull.
No.
Hey, Rocky
Back to my story.
wait, these are Rocky Mountain oysters.
And there's
No, not the oysters.
Nope. But there's two things.
My bad. Sorry.
There's two things about this. First of all, it actually did work. I wasn't cold for the rest of the winter, and so I didn't have to do it again. And second of all,
say you were blessed with a child 9 months later.
No. And the moral of the story is you never trust anybody from Citibank.
All right. And Gordon, if I'm now our expert on urination, what does that make you?
Oh, my.
Oh, my.
Oh, no.
I gotta
Jedediah, hard right.
Well, I'm going to take you to something a little more appetizing than these guys have taken you. Pizza. And pizza in vending machines. Never thought this would happen, but Let's Pizza is a company. They are promising to deliver piping hot pizza in 3 minutes, all fresh ingredients, nothing frozen, from scratch. And we can show you guys can watch while I'm talking. There are 200 toppings to choose from. They can accommodate a variety of diets. If you're kosher, if you're a vegetarian, you basically input what you want. It goes through this whole system where the dough is kneaded. No, please, you're ruining my appetite. The dough is kneaded, and it pops out in this box, and they say it's human hands free. So for, you know, we germaphobes, this could be good. It's been tested out in Italy. People like it. It's the product of an Italian entrepreneur. I want to like this because I hate airport food and got sick from it once, but the Italian American in me just is very suspicious about the taste. I want my brick oven pizza, you know?
It's hard to see this without thinking of Mayor Bloomberg.
Yeah. Exactly. Mine's real fast. Sabrina Grant of Farmingham, Massachusetts. She says that her autistic son, Chris Quirk, went to school last week with a loose tooth. Well, apparently, little Chris was wiggling and wiggling that loose tooth. And at around lunchtime, the mother got an email from an aide who'd been watching this little boy wiggling and wiggling his loose tooth. You remember we all used to do this when our teeth were falling out. And the aide got so irritated at watching this kid that she just went over and yanked the tooth out herself. She sent a note to the mother saying, when your child gets home, you're going to find a tooth missing. He was wiggling it all day, and I decided to yank it out, and we'll send you the tooth as well. So apparently he can still get his quarter from the tooth fairy. Well, here's what is funny about this story. When the son got home, the mother noticed the loose tooth was still in his mouth, and that the aide had pulled out the wrong tooth, had pulled out the kid's molar.
Oh my God.
Yes, so my reaction to that was she's got a really firm grip. Because in the movies, you have to use pliers to get those out, but apparently this aide...
And the kid wasn't screaming?
I guess not.
Wow.
No,
That's
Did you do that when you were a teacher?
brave kid. No, I didn't.
Is that a service
do
you provided?
I did not provide that service.
Hey.
That's all the time we have. Our thanks to Gordon Chang, who was supposed to raise the maturity level from Forbes.com, joining us tonight. Next up is the BS of A. Good night.